Clay, we learned a shocking piece of information about Star Trek, maybe Enterprise specific in this one. In this episode, that requires you to suspend a lot of disbelief. I had a lot of trouble suspending my disbelief for the fact that apparently shuttlecraft of this era don't have toilets on them, and you're forced to piss in a bottle when you go on a journey in a shuttlecraft, at least according to Trip Sim Tucker the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th in this episode. Surprising you?
Really,
is that the most unbelievable thing that's ever happened in Star Trek, that these things don't have toilets in them?
Yeah, it really puts a new spin on the Shuttlecraft 1 episode.
When, they're just pissing on each other
for like 3 days.
Which he references in that scene in a heartfelt, touching way. Yeah, I don't see how humanity builds anything that you can be in longer than 30 minutes and not have a toilet capacity to it. It's strange. I guess,
it's basically like having a school bus.
Yeah.
Because I always thought, not that you ever, imagine having a bathroom on a school bus. That would just be a fucking nightmare.
There'd be a lot of assaults, defecation, and horrible stuff going on in school.
Many times I wish there had been one, but honestly, realistically, I don't, because
the trains
you barely want to pee in front of person in public in general. You don't want to do it as a school child on a bus.
On a moving target.
Imagine, like, not only would it be difficult to do, but like you know that you would go in there and then everybody would be like, whoever goes in the bathroom, everybody just gets really quiet, and then when you come out, they'll like point at you or something.
Yeah. The trains, when I used to take the train before COVID into Boston, they have a toilet, but it's just, people are surrounding it in seats. Like you go in and come out, and it's just like everyone knows that this guy shit up the toilet right now, and let's all stare at him as he gets out of here.
I went to school in New York, so I took the bus a lot coming home. The one thing that it took me a very long time to realize, and I understand this is probably just for safety reasons to cover their own asses. And also I guess for maybe cleanliness purposes, but like there's a thing in there that says, do not pee while standing up.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, no fucking way. It's like trying to hit a moving target, but I'm going to do it because I'm not sitting down on that thing for many reasons.
Because other people have definitely been standing up is the key takeaway here. Yeah.
Right. And also it's just like those things are so small, and I'm a, big dude. So the bathrooms are small enough as they are. So it's like, you just got to brace and kind of spray and pray, as they say.
I just think of that, the Chappelle sketch, like the Keeping It Real world or whatever. He's like, you my bitch, you sit down when you pee. It's the only thing that I can think of in that situation. Similitude is the next Star Trek episode. We're going to play a clip from it. We'll come back and we'll break it down.
The larvae has another, somewhat more controversial property. When implanted with DNA from another species, it exactly replicates that species' life cycle, albeit at a rapidly accelerated rate.
It becomes a clone.
Essentially, but one that is born, grows old, and dies in approximately 15 days. The Lysarians call them mimetic symbiotes. They're a closely guarded secret. Very few people know of their existence.
Similitude is the 10th episode of the 3rd season of Star Trek Enterprise. It came out on November 19th, 2003. What is it? 11 out of 28 of the Zindi Crisis had a brain fart. They're written by Manny Coto. First episode written by Manny Coto, the future showrunner in season 4. Directed by LeVar Burton. In-universe date is specifically not known. It's 2153. In this episode, during an engine performance test, Trip Tucker is critically injured and left comatose in sickbay. Phlox suggests that Tucker's only hope for survival is the creation of a mimetic symbiote, in other words, a clone. The crew and Trip's clone have to face the unforeseen emotional ramifications of its creation. That's a totally accurate blurb, but it's kind of a funny, it's a long one, and it's kind of funny. Similitude. I don't know where to start with this one. I guess I'll let you start with it, but I'll say this for Similitude. This is the most Star Trek-y concept of an Enterprise episode that I've seen to this point. There have been other ones that have felt Star Trek-y, like Dear Doctor and Cogenitor, I think, feel kind of Star Trek-y. Even Twilight feels a little bit. Twilight wasn't very good, and it also feels like they do that in a lot of other shows. This was the most interesting concept of an episode that I've seen so far in Star Trek Enterprise. We'll get into it. You can go off of that if you want to, or you can go wherever you want.
Well, I'd first like to mention that even though Manny did a great job on the script, I had some notes. And I kind of used all my notes up in the first 5 minutes of the show.
Have you? I know they can't be 69ing, but can they at least be laying in a 69 position while they massage?
Lavar, picture this. We start on the feet, and then we do a circular camera move, but the fulcrum, the pivot point, is her butt. Because she got a great ass.
He's criticizing the dailies. He's like, their rotation in the 69 is completely fucked up.
And then what if she just like puts it on his face, but not in a way that so censors won't bitch at us, but she just puts it on his face.
Clean it up, Manny. Manny, have you seen Brent? What's he up to these days? Similitude means likeness. I had to look it up. It means a likeness or a similarity. I guess it's another word for a similarity, but a similitude. What'd you think?
Yeah, I agree. This is the most Star Trek-y concept, and that's probably you know how I feel about that stuff. So it probably might not surprise you to hear that this is my favorite episode of the season so far.
Sure. I don't find that surprising. I have pushback.
Honestly might be one of my favorites of the whole series, to be honest with you.
Yeah. So why is that? I guess we'll start there. I had to watch this episode twice. I watched it last night, and I haven't been doing that with a lot of recent Enterprise episodes because I think I get it on the first time. This one, I was not sure what I thought about it, and I think it's definitely. I think in a lot of ways, it's the best Star Trek Enterprise episode that I've seen so far. I think it's also critically flawed in some ways, or it's like it either makes choices or has production aspects to it that knock it down quite a bit from being like an all-time classic Trek episode, unfortunately. So, I think this is a very good episode, and it's potentially one of my favorites of the series, if not or one of the best of the series, if not the best. It also left me incredibly frustrated that I feel that you've hit Enterprise's ceiling, and it's like I don't think the show can go above into a great stratosphere, unfortunately.
Yeah, I feel like it just puts some really, really interesting elements on the table. This, to me, kind of rights all the wrongs that I had with Twilight, where you've got this interesting sort of like... for lack of a better term, let's call this an alternate timeline story to a certain extent, because you're dealing with like a different version of Trip.
Yep.
And what they do here is all of the things that we were wishing they would do in Twilight, where it's like, well, what is the purpose of this? The purpose is to learn things about Trip as a character, but also learn things about the other characters through their interactions with this Trip, where even though things are going to go back to the way they were, they're never really going to go back to the way they were. Something has changed. We've learned something by all of this happening.
Yeah.
I think the idea is super interesting. This idea that not only are they creating a clone, but they're creating a clone that is generating the life memories of Trip.
Basically, it's not even a clone. He is Trip on some level. Yeah.
Right. It's just like a photocopy, basically. Really, it's like a Polaroid picture where you gotta shake it out but once it develops, it's the whole deal. But that's an interesting element to add to the cloning thing that they don't usually like. It's not. This is like kind of like a Tom Riker situation,
sort of. Yeah.
But it doesn't have that split point that Tom Riker had. This is just like this. It's a landfill situation, really.
Yeah, he is. Where I guess the thing you're saying is that Riker, because of the separation, had time to develop into a different version of Riker, and this is literally just Trip again in 15 days. A Chia Pet version of Trip.
It also landed for me because there's a comic story I've been working on in the back of my head for a while that kind of does something sort of similar to this. So it's nice to see that someone realized a similar concept and it worked.
Yep.
But it's yeah, it adds a lot of really interesting things to chew on. But I do think there are some elements that get kind of short shrift, like Archer getting up in his face and basically saying, "I don't give a shit about you. I'm going to save Trip to accomplish this mission."
Yeah,
that's a big deal. Like, they don't ever really reconcile any of that. Like, I think there's probably more you could do with this idea. So it's a bit of a bummer that it's over so quickly, but as a concept and for most of the execution of it, I think it's really good.
Yeah. The things that I like about it are, I think the concept itself is clever and interesting and appropriate for Enterprise where it is in this season. Like, it's kind of it's a storyline that has a lot of characters where they are at this Xindi arc point in the season where they kind of have to think about things like this and like the greater good and what's willing to be a sacrifice for the greater good. And I think that the concept of this growing a clone to basically harvest its organs to save the original version of it is kind of a neat. I don't think that's ever happened in Star Trek before. Not that maybe it happened in Voyager or something, but I can't remember an episode we've seen that that's happened. So it feels original and novel in that sense. I think it's really strong, and I think it's one of the few Star Trek Enterprise episodes where I actually feel something for the people involved.
Sure.
I don't think it works 100% effectively. There are some moments that I wish didn't happen, but mostly right before the final minute of the episode where Sim goes into the thing and he's like, Phlox, I just want to tell you, you're a great dad. And Phlox goes, you're a hell of a son. It's like, I wish that line was not in this episode. I thought that was terrible. But in most of the parts, I think they do okay with the emotionality of it. I like Archer in this episode. I like Trip as Sim. I have problems with T'Pol that are not going to be original complaints that I have about T'Pol. But I think the main thing I have with this, besides the very production-heavy sense of, I think this is too much episode for one episode of the show, and it feels like this would have benefited greatly from being a two-parter. My main technical problem with it is that I really found it obnoxious how they stack the conflict onto each other as they're going through this. So I had to write it down. So Trip gets hurt. Then you do this cloning thing. Then they learn that there are genetic memories. So this wasn't expected, but now this Trip is basically real Trip. So you've complicated things there. Then they reveal that Phlox is lying and the procedure will kill him, which is another thing that they stack on. And then they reveal after that there's potentially this enzyme that Phlox didn't tell anybody about that could potentially save him from dying. And I think that a lot of the punch of this episode is removed from that artificial stacking of conflict that they're trying to do. They're trying to keep the plot moving forward and stuff like that, but I feel this episode suffers a lot. It doesn't have time to hang with what the central problem is, like the central concept and where Archer stands and what the sacrifice here that everyone is getting upset about, or how T'Pol is supposed to react to this and what this means for everything. Because they keep escalating stuff, it kicks the can down the road and it never really grabs hold of what the central point is here. I don't think very satisfying for me anyway.
I actually like the last bit about the enzyme that could extend his life, because I think that's an interesting wrinkle that they throw in there to make the choice on everybody's part more difficult. Because if that's not in there, then what does Sim really have to lose? Archer kind of gives him the speech at one point where he's like, "What are you going to just float out there and die?"
Well, he kind of they have a time crunch, because if he doesn't do it before he dies of natural causes, his brain will be too old to go into Trip. So they do say you have to do this surgery right now.
Yeah, but like, there's no upside for him unless there's a possibility he lives. If he doesn't do it, then Trip dies. And if he does do it, if he doesn't do it, he dies. And if he does do it, he dies. There's no upside. There's no, like, him making a decision just makes him look like an asshole if he chooses not to do it. And there's no purpose to anything. So having him have a possible backdoor out of it makes the decision that much harder for everybody, I think. Because, I mean, you could make the argument that it's like, well, I mean, this trip is brand new. The other trip is dying in a coma. What if we just use this one from now on? It's the same person. He's got all the same, there's that kind of stuff is now in play.
Yeah.
Without that little element, I don't think that stuff comes into play. I think one of the biggest problems though is, and that all of this is done because essentially Enterprise gets a flat tire.
Yeah, they get stuck in that nebula or whatever it is.
It's like if we were driving in a car in the snow and like the car skidded off the road into a ditch, and I whacked my head and got knocked into a coma, and it was like we need to grow a clone, kill the clone, do this crazy surgery so we have an extra pair of hands to push the car up out of the hole.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if you're going to the mat for killing this clone, this new sentient being, just to kind of get the car out of the hole, like that's not super interesting. I wish there was something a little bit more.
I think there is
to have. Well, I was just gonna say, to have Archer have that intense of a reaction, I wish there was something a little bit more Xindi based, like they were like just about to get to a certain point that they needed or something.
Yeah. I was thinking
it's right there and they need Trip. They need to get out of this situation, but it's just the next impediment of the Expanse, which, well, fine, whatever. It's just, it could be punched up a little bit.
Yeah. I think there's maybe multiple ways to look at this. So my interpretation is not that they need Trip to get out of this nebula that they're in, but Archer believes that he needs his chief engineer in order to continue this mission. Basically, what he's basically saying is that there's no one here who can do the job that Trip was doing, which is probably troubling in the sense that you'd think Archer would have multiple engineers on this mission who are able to do this. So it's a lot.
Somewhere the second in command is like, what the fuck, Cap?
So
you think I've been understudying this guy for the last 3 years, so you don't just to have no faith put in me when it's my turn at bat? I've been carrying this room, buddy.
Faith is in the theme song, motherfucker.
Yeah,
I think so. It puts a lot of importance on Trip in rescuing him, which I think is maybe fine. I was thinking a similar thought to what you were saying is, after I'd watched it, I kind of wanted to revise it to this thing that Trip is talking about at the start while they're doing their Massage 69 session is he's done something to the engines that are going to allow them to search the nebula more quick. I think they had to focus on that, make it like Trip is right on the precipice of discovering something very important, and he gets hit in that explosion. And then Archer's like, did he tell anybody what he was working on? And they go, no. And he's like, well, we need Trip to come back to tell us what's going on. And then you can even feed that into Sim. If Sim gets the memories, you can almost say like through his growth, he's not going to learn about what this was until that point or something like that. But I think that they didn't have enough. I think Archer's rationale for needing Trip to be back is a little bit wishy-washy in the sense of it only really works because he's the main cast member of the show that you need to bring back. And if this was reality, I would feel that Archer is more forgiving of losing Trip in this situation. You know?
And especially the way that he's reacting. I think you need something a little bit more beefy to back up that scene where he tells Sim that he's worthless, basically.
I will cut you open, take your heart out, and give it to him.
Yeah, that's pretty intense, man.
Well, let's talk about Archer.
Sure.
Do you like Archer? What
that scene is just like wild because
I'm going to kill you scene.
Yeah, he comes into that room like he's like kind of hunched over. He's got like a 5 o'clock shadow, and he's kind of like looking over the top of his eyes at Trip, getting ready to be like, "We need you to die." And it's like
licking his lips.
It's just a weird choice, especially because they haven't really been checking in with him much through the episode.
Yeah,
to like see how he's getting to this point. It's just sort of like, all right, in this scene, you're drunk. Yeah, and you're gonna tell your friend how much you don't need him anymore. So it's I'm on the fence with him in this one. I like what they're doing. I don't know if it's all entirely earned.
I think my problem with Archer to this point is that his arc has not been done well.
Yeah. I agree.
He basically alternates each episode, whether or not he's angry Archer who's willing to risk it all, or just normal Archer who's out there in the expanse doing stuff. Like in Anomaly, the Anomaly, the one where he tortures the guy in the airlock, the Shipment where he finds the Xindi on the planet and yells at them for a while. And then this one, he's angry Archer, who's angry the entire time. And this one, I thought they did a really effective job of making it look like this mission is actually wearing on Archer. As you say, he doesn't shave anymore. He looks tired all the time. And you're starting to get a sense. But we just talked about North Star, where he's like, let's check out this planet. What's going on?
Yeah.
What's going on in this planet? This is a lot of fun. And I don't feel that there's any consistency to his anger development over the course of the season. Like, I don't feel that they are consistently building him to this place. I like his reaction in this. I feel that Archer should, at some point of this arc, have this breaking point episode. He had one in Anomaly. I feel like Anomaly in this should be coming around the same time, where he's starting to realize, like, I need to do some drastic things to make this actually happen. It's just the inconsistency of it. And I still don't 100% buy Bakula as the guy who's yelling at Trip in this. Like, it's still that old problem.
Yeah, it's like I was saying about the way he plays that scene. It feels like a scene out of the off-Broadway production of Death of a Salesman or something. Where he's like, he's getting a little theatery with it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I fully buy it, really.
I also don't like the line. I think it's a bad when Trip says, "What are you going to do? Kill me?" I think it's bad writing to have the other character go, "I will kill you." They should probably have a more subtle thing of like, you don't want to find out what I'm capable of or something like that. I don't like the repetition of the exact same thing being said back to him, especially Archer.
What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Kill me? Yep.
Absolutely. I think, and if you're designing Archer, I think Archer still has to have this like veil of Starfleet around him at this point, where he can't say, "Yeah, I'm gonna cut your head off and do whatever I want to it."
I'm not gonna kill you. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
He needs to be
bash them right the fuck in.
A little bit more reserved. That's my problem with it. And the other situation that I like both angles, or I like all the angles that they do with this. Who's the main relationship with Trip in this episode? Who's the other person? Because I don't even think Trip is really a character. I'm not sure Sim is really a character in this. Is this a T'Pol episode or an Archer episode? If you bar those other characters out of it, or we can choose which plot you want to talk. We kind of talked about Archer already. We can go into T'Pol and then move into it, but
yeah, we may as well. I don't know if I would say Sim isn't a kid, because he's kind of like the binding to everything that's going on. Because I don't know if I'd call it a T'Pol episode.
I guess you'd say that like Sim's decision about whether or not his sacrifice is worth it for the greater good is the main storyline of it. You know what I mean? Because to be a Sim episode, that would have to be the main theme, I think, is this character learning that his sacrifice is meaningful. I find the meaningfulness in everything else that's tertiary to that, whether it's Archer deciding or T'Pol talking to him about her feelings. So we can talk about T'Pol quickly.
Yeah, sure.
Outside of the performance, which I hate because she's misty-eyed this entire episode.
She's been hanging around humans, man. Clearly she's got the hots for Trip. She wanted to admit it to herself, but you know.
I would buy this, except for the fact that we just got through Twilight, and I know Kyle yelled at me on the Discord for this, being an old man and being like, "Are they married in this episode, or what's going on?" But my thing
I didn't see a ring on it. What are they doing living together?
Just tell me if I'm wrong. Didn't Twilight imply that there was potential chemistry between Archer and T'Pol?
Well, they've been living together for 12 years.
So that's not something that's only in the what if timeline of Twilight that relationship would develop, because my whole understanding of whether or not T'Pol and Trip mean something here is that has been building through their Vulcan massage sessions effectively. Right. Would you agree would you say that it has been effective to this point?
Well, I think that's a problem that we've kind of talked about previously, is if that's what they're going for, they're not doing a great job with it, because it is, I don't know.
That's my Twilight point. It feels like they pit stopped with Archer could have sex with her too if he wanted to, and then now it's back to Trip.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because I mean, like, I don't think you need to have, I don't know. Can I believe that these massage sessions have been more or less platonic, but they are in fact generating feelings for each other? They're just not showing it. Sure.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think you need a scene where that's revealed to be the case. I haven't seen. Well, I don't remember that.
Isn't that what this episode is, though? Kinda, because that's the scene. The scene where Sim talks to T'Pol and he's like, you know, all I do is think about you, but I don't know if these feelings are mine or Trip's. Isn't that effectively that scene?
Well, but I think his point is valid enough where I'm not sure. I don't know whose feelings these are supposed to be. So,
I don't think this is the.
T'Pol is reacting as if it's Trip, because if it was just Sim, she's like, I just fucking met you. I don't know who you are, and you're going to be dead in a couple days, so I don't have any feelings for you whatsoever.
Well,
you know?
yeah. I don't know. Because I don't think that this has to be like all of a sudden the door is open, and this doesn't have to be the scene where the next episode T'Pol runs to the airport to stop him from getting on that plane and flying out of her life, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think this works as the first step in that direction, because I don't think it needs to be clear whether or not it's Trip or whether or not it's Sim. I think the point of that is that there is something there in some form, and clearly the fact that she decides to make out with him before he dies implies that at the very least she is recognizing that as a possibility or something. So I don't think it needs to be clear at this point one way or the other. Mm-hmm. I think this is just like, this is the first step they're taking where it's like, well, something might be going on.
Yeah, I think I do need it to be clear. I need there to be a scene in a previous episode or something where Trip is reticent or nervous or was concerned that his feelings for T'Pol might be somehow inappropriate at this point. You know, like on this mission with a superior officer, this is not the time. Like, he's actually getting concerned about what the crew is thinking and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Because when it gets to this point, the problem that Sim does is that Sim exposes that he's trying to keep bottled up because he's concerned about the ramifications of it coming out. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit more of like letting the cat out of the bag is a little bit more of a important marker in this. If this is a serial relationship building storyline, I feel that that's a more like unfortunate, for lack of a better word, way for Trip's hand to be exposed. And if it's just the fact that it's more playing on what this episode is doing, where it wants to play around with this idea of whose feelings are these either Sims or are they Trip's, I think that it knocks it down quite a bit, because I need to know what's going on there, I guess. Like, I need to know that, because if it's Sim, I think it's actually kind of silly. So I'm inclined to believe, and I think T'Pol is inclined to believe, that it's Trip's feelings that are coming through. And I just think it's not serviced enough. It's the problem with the episode, just doesn't have enough runtime, because I like that storyline, but I also like the Archer storyline on top of it, but they don't have time to do both of them, unfortunately. I don't think.
Yeah, I don't mind it. I think this works for me as the jumping off point for this kind of thing, because I like not knowing. Mm-hmm. I think not knowing is part of what makes it interesting, because I think it'd be interesting to see whether or not T'Pol and Trip have a conversation.
Right.
I mean, like, if you were going to extend this episode out, there's probably, although I mean, you could do it next episode, who knows? There's definitely room for some sort of conversation where one or both of them either go, yeah, things are getting kind of, complicated, or for both of them to deny it, or one of them deny it, or whatever.
Yeah.
However you want to play that. But as far as a let's move this thing forward and kind of kick this off, I don't mind. I think I think the not knowing makes it interesting for me. I don't think you need to have a definite one way or the other.
Yeah. I guess before we move on, my final point of it would be if they are doing it as exposing Tripp's real feelings, I think it's another mismanaged serial storyline that the show has not done great to this point. So it's kind of similar to Archer's development as a character. Like over the course of this season, I think they could have done a better job of explaining Archer's arc, where his anger grows and then becomes a breaking point, and then he has to sort of reconcile or have redemption towards the end of it. And the same with this relationship arc. In my eyes, all they've done to this point is show us that they do these massage sessions occasionally.
Right.
And that Tripp was uncomfortable at first with it, but now they talk to each other as if they're just chums, like now they're just kind of like, the massage is so comfortable to them that they are talking about work while they're doing it, and maybe that's a kind of subtlety that I'm not appreciating, but I just think that I would have preferred knowing where this was coming from, I guess, because to me, to go back to the Archer to Paul question, in a Star Trek sense, I think Archer's decision to create this clone and harvest it is a more interesting sci-fi concept than this relationship development that's going on, especially because I don't think they built the relationship enough. So I wish they had gone with the Archer thing over most of it, but both angles of attack, I think, work.
Yeah, I think there's room for all of it. And that's kind of why I think it's more of, I would call it a sim episode more than I would call it a T'Pol or Archer episode, because he's the focal point of everything, so he's informing everything else that's going on. So there's room. His existence is causing all of these other stories to happen. I think some of them get short shrift, unfortunately, but I think there's room for all of that stuff. Like even the Phlox stuff, I enjoy the Phlox stuff. Phlox, yeah. I would have liked more from Phlox about being a conflicted dad, Yeah. Why do they have baby stuff on Enterprise? Can the replicator make that? I thought the replicator could like barely do anything at this point.
What did they make, a baby bottle? I guess they
had a bottle and baby clothes and like a little baby hat. They didn't even cut to Mayweather like knitting a hat or something.
I'm still not sure if they have replicators. I actually don't know. So I take this to mean that you didn't. A big problem that a lot of people have with this episode is that the Phlox's magical larva thing that he has, that he uses.
Whatever.
I don't really care, and I sort of like Phlox's sickbay design. I like this fact that he has all these animals that he can do stuff with. It does get a little bit magic boxy after a while, where he's like, I have a bug that can fix that, and he does something with it. But I think it really defines him as a unique doctor, that he has these very prototypical solutions to things, and he's got these animals that he can fiddle around with and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I think it makes more sense than like some sort of clone orb or something. There's something that's just completely out of left field. I think him having something weird in his menagerie that could do this, sure, why not?
Or that he just does it as a if he does it as just a normal medical procedure, it makes you wonder, why don't they do this all the time? Really, right. I like that it's kind of a magical bug that no one else is allowed to talk about that does things.
It's not like the current version of the X-Men that's going on. They all live on this mutant island that has this capability it has all of the genetic code of every mutant built into it, so when a mutant dies they can just grow a new one.
Yep
That has all the same memories and everything.
It's a good out. They copied Similitude. What's the main point of this episode, would you say? What is this episode about? It's the main thrust.
What is the episode about?
Is it about memories define you as a person? Is it about sacrifice for the greater good? Is it about the need to push buttons and do questionable moral things if your back is to the wall? Are they all feeding into each other in a somewhat less than super satisfying way? Or is it a diffusion of importance because there are so many plots going on at the same time?
I think those are all kind of going at the same time, but I feel like the strongest one is probably the question of what makes a person. Is it their body? Is it their memories? Is it their actions? That kind of stuff. That seems to be the overriding. Because I mean, that's the key in that scene with T'Pol is when he says, "I don't know if these feelings are trips or if they're mine."
Yep.
When the answer is yes.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep. So outside of that scene, would you say that the episode focuses on the point that this is Trip? Do you think that I don't know if the episode sells this hard enough, that this is basically Trip, because what I think that they did in the construction of it was they had to put this time limit on things where he's going to die no matter what.
Right.
And I think it deflates the point of, is this Trip substantially, because you know that this version of him is not going to be around for very long. And because he's not going to be around for very long, it becomes, as you say, just convincing him to have the surgery done to save Trip. And if he wasn't going to die, I think the argument he's making, which is like, well, how am I any different than Trip, is much more of an interesting one that Archer would have to question about too, because I don't know if I think that's really fascinating, and I don't know if they get into it. Like I would say that what I want the primary stories to be is Archer makes the decision that they have to clone Trip and then harvest the organs. So I would get rid of this fact of them thinking that they could do it harmlessly to the clone and like everyone can live happily ever after. I would have Phlox just set it up. We can do this, and you're going to kill this guy to bring back original Trip.
It's funny. I actually didn't realize that wasn't the case until like deeper into the episode, until like they called it out. I just assumed that it was like, they were
going to kill him. Like the procedure would kill him. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it takes a little bit of I just think I don't know if it misses the point, because I'm not really sure what the central point is. I think there's so many plot lines going on or angles of attack on this idea of what would happen if Trip was cloned and turned into the Sim character. I think that Archer gets off a little bit easy from his decision, where he's just like, I ordered Phlox to do that. And T'Pol's like, you did? That seems kind of quick that you made that decision. He goes, yeah, that's fine. All the way to Archer going, I will kill you if you try to prevent this from happening. That's my favorite aspect and angle of it. And I don't know if the episode services Sim as a person enough, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think the what is what constitutes a person is the forward idea theme, I think, because you've got T'Pol is kind of dealing with that because she's sort of pushing him away at the beginning. Everybody's kind of pushing him away at the beginning, and Archer's getting up in his face telling him he's going to kill him or whatever.
Well, they can't bond with him. There's no upside bonding with him, really. Yeah.
And then the whole point of the ending is that they're celebrating him as a member of the crew. Yeah, as he was just as much a member of this crew as anybody else was. So yeah, I think that's probably the heavy theme that they're dealing with. And
interestingly, no interaction with real Trip in the ending outside of the camera looks at him and he's watching. But there's no. I was convinced you have to end this with a T'Pol and Trip scene, or I feel that they're the most appropriate ones to talk to each other. And I do like that. What makes a person? I think this to become an all-time great episode. I think that this episode has to cut back a few of the layers that it's got going onto it and really focus on whether or not Sim is Trip, and whether or not trying to convince him to, like, the decision that Archer has to make to make him go through this procedure. If there's an off chance that there's this enzyme that will allow Sim to live on and continue, I think that it's undersold. And I'm a little bit all over the place, but the drive, to me, that feels like a pit stop weird conflict point where Phlox is like, there's not a lot of evidence. Don't even bring that up. The conflict would actually be, it is possible to keep you alive, but you're not Trip. You know what I mean? There's that kind of a thing. I don't know. I feel that there's a lot of just ground that they could have dug up in those situations, and instead they kind of play as just spaces in the plot where the minor conflict appears, and then the characters kind of split off of it, and it never feels like it's really all that important.
Yeah, I think the stacking of problems on the cloning aspect. I like the twist that there is a thing that can save him. I think the problem is that it's not born out of any action or anything. It's all just information that was not given.
How did Trip find that out, or Sim? Did he Google that? How did he find out? He's like, "Have you ever heard of the circle of the velvet rabbits?" And they're like, "No, it's never mind."
Yeah. It's all that stuff is just very like, it's not born of any action from the story. It's not a complication because it's not a story-born complication. It's a writer-born complication.
Yeah.
That's just someone. It's like the Simpsons Halloween episode where they think they're going to be eaten by the space aliens. Because Lisa finds the book that says like to serve man or whatever,
right.
And then he goes, wait a minute, and he blows the dust off, and it's like how to serve man a great dinner.
Yeah,
blows it out. Like it's that kind of thing where it's like it's an artificial extending of the problem or stacking of the problem. It doesn't feel quite as like I would be fine if the only thing that they did was, oh yeah, oof, Archer, I didn't tell you. There is a way to keep the clone alive. I figured if I told you, you wouldn't want to do it because of blah. So then puts it on. Then it's born out of Phlox making a decision, and that impacting how everybody else reacts to stuff. So it's like you can get some stuff out of that, which it's more satisfying than just if it's like, oh wait, hold on, this page was folded over too far. I couldn't read the bottom of the paragraph.
Yeah. I would like to get down to that core of it, how it's, I don't even think the episode has time because it has to move so quickly to really focus on, T'Pol questions Archer's motives post-decision. There's no, I'm a little bit confused and a little bit dismayed that this series doesn't do senior officer staff meetings ever. Archer's very unilateral in what he decides to do. He just decides and everyone else has to go with it. It just felt like this is an episode that's prime for Archer summons all the senior officers who all have a different perspective on whether or not this is the right thing to do, and then Archer does it.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
It's just Enterprise is not really a series that takes the time to do that dissection. They rely on the action and the emotion of the incidents instead. And I think it works in this episode, and it usually doesn't. But it still feels rushed in that the show doesn't really want to get into what the main problem of these characters is. Before we go to final thoughts, the other super novel thing, I don't think I've ever seen a shuttlecraft tries to tow a starship sequence in Star Trek, which is amazing considering that seems kind of obvious that you would do it. I like that set piece. That was kind of fun. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, aside from the, silly magnet rust stuff, whatever. I thought that was fun. Yeah,
I like how T'Pol carried that giant magnet in, and she put it on the table and pulled a cup, but it doesn't pull her like towards the ceiling or anything, when she's walking around. The only other minor thing that made me laugh was in this galactic scale where we talk about like space distances and speed of light and warp 9, which is infinite speed or whatever. At the end, when the shuttle is towing them, they're going like 6 miles an hour, and T'Pol's like, "We'll be out of here in 5 hours." Yeah, they could probably just take the shuttle and get everyone out of the thing first for how quick, like how close to the edge of that dust cloud they were. I just thought in this galactic distance thing, it was a very short distance that they had to travel to get out of there.
Yeah, and just to circle back to your senior officer meeting thing. We had on our stream we did about Mortal Kombat and Godzilla versus Kong. I forget who brought it up, but they mentioned characters with a clear points of view, and I think this is an episode that would really benefit from that. So if you have that scene with the officers getting together, and then Archer presents this idea, you get to see what T'Pol's starting point is, what Archer's starting point is, what Phlox or Reed's
Phlox
starting point is. So when he does it, you know where every character stands in regards to this, and then that can inform the interaction that they have, you know?
Yeah.
So like you could, in that situation, you could have T'Pol be reticent for some reasons that might imply, well, I don't know. She probably wouldn't, be like, well, I don't think we should do this because I would like to hug him.
I think T'Pol's logical rationale for why this shouldn't be done makes sense for her. I think you can start her in we shouldn't do this because this is not an ethical thing to do, can spiral into a more, we shouldn't have done this because it was a personal bad thing to do. Mm-hmm. I find that to be a believable jump between them. I didn't mean to interrupt, but go ahead.
No, but I think with T'Pol, you could extend that to be like, her point of view is, I don't think we should do this because it's unethical. And also, this would not be Trip. You're making a recreation of him. You're making a facsimile. And so when they start that, which feeds into why she's distant from him. And then eventually when they have that scene, she kind of realizes, well,
I was wrong.
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah, right.
To take a quote from President Clinton, what does "is" really mean? Different context here.
I agree, and I think that's the stuff that the episode is kind of missing. I think it's missing those personal moments. It has some. On a technical level, they spend about 7 minutes with Trip growing up, and on my rewatch, it really stuck out as this is not developing anything. Like the time that you're spending with the kid learning how to read, into young Trip asking T'Pol out, which is kind of okay but still strange, into another version of older Trip. There's like 3 sequences of Trip where he's growing up. They do it to not just jump from baby to adult Trip, but it's a complete waste of time in terms of what the story is trying to do. It's unfortunate that they had to go through it.
Yeah, I would have split this into 2 episodes, and I would have ended the first one with Phlox telling Archer that there is a way to prevent him from dying.
Yeah. And
so then you've got plenty of time to parse that stuff out. And if Archer's at that point, if Archer's the only one who knows, it's like, well, Archer now has to make a decision. And then at some point he's like, okay, well, I can't keep this to myself. I have to tell him. So then he tells him, and then he blows up about it. And he's like, no, I don't want to fuck. Kind of, So I think there's so much stuff they could deal with that. I found this episode to be about as satisfying as I can expect from Enterprise. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I think you could do more with it, but as far as Enterprise goes as a show, this is, I didn't leave unsatisfied.
Yeah. Well, let's wrap it up there then. So we'll take a break, play a clip from the episode. We'll come back, read some patron thoughts, and give our final thoughts about Similitude.
If you truly have all of Trip's memories, you know the answer to that. I don't have to tell you what's at stake. I must complete this mission. And to do that, I need Trip. Trip! I'll take whatever steps necessary to save him.
Even if it means killing me.
Even if it means killing you.
Thank you very much for listening today to our coverage of Similitude. We are in the midst of Enterprise's 3rd season. If you want to support the show as we move at 6 miles an hour for the next 5 miles out of here, you can support us on patreon.com/the File. It's the best way to do it. We're very close to our Voyager goal. If we get to $900 per month, we will cover Voyager in full. It took a hit this month, as it always does. People drop off at the first of the month, but we're like $20 away, so we're super close. Terrifyingly close. the Patreon money is flying like those iron meteorites at the ship that is the podcast, and just sticking to it.
I feel like this us dancing near this this goal is like, when you're a kid and you're driving with your parents and you see the off ramp for like ice cream and you're like, let's go, it's right there, and your dad's like, what? I don't see. Oh, I just missed it. I'm sorry. I can't turn around. I just missed the off. I would have taken you, but I can't now.
There's this what it reminds me of is this famous, in the second Buffalo Bills Dallas Cowboys Super Bowl, when the Bills went to 4 in a row and they lost 4 in a row. The second one against the Cowboys, they got blown out. It was like 52 to 12 or something. But very late in the game, one of the Cowboys' defensive players picked up a fumble from Buffalo and brought it like 80 yards down to about to score, and they were up huge. So the guy started hot-shotting it with like 10 yards to go, sort of like high-stepping and like slowed down. And Don Beebe on Buffalo ran the entire distance this very late in the game, never gave up, and slapped the ball out of his hand at the 1 yard line, so he didn't score with it. I feel like that's the Patreon thing. The more that we start high-stepping as we get closer to it, someone's just going to slap the ball out of our hands. So maybe that's the last time I bring it up. We're very far from our Patreon goal. Thank you, patrons. Special thank you to our Captain Tier supporters on Patreon: Tariq Latif, Joint Mango, Kyle Barrett, Sam McCuster, Mike Burnett, Andrew Chorlog, Michael Pond, Matt Ross, Matt Cutler, Christian Pouch, Cardinal Doomsday, Nick Sergey, Sean, Bradley Killens, Grim Santo, Dwayne Hackett, Kevin Reyes, Jordan Cooper, Darth Mosk, Paul 13 Hero, Russell Elwich, Stephen Minton, HH28, Derek Zajac, Paul Roscoe, Point Next to G, Jacob123, Johnny Franceschi, Mike Harris, Captain Brazen, Eric Antoine, Nick the Rat, Jakey's Gamer, Kevin Lowry, Corey Martin, Garoppolo John Zorn, William Scheisler, Rayhan Jaffer, Zane Majors, Dave Davies, Retail, Sterling Blue, Patrick Seba, Worf Steinbrown, Dix, Tom Hickey, Matthew Houston, Captain McMunchausen, James McLennan, Jose Hunter's EWNF Remixes, Will Clay, page 2, Mark C, Bella, I still can't pronounce these, I think it's Belle, Jonas, Lokai, and Olivier Pardue. Thank you very much for supporting the show, guys.
I can't believe it's May.
I know.
Ugh.
More Patron topics. The first one is Clockwork Orange is what we're covering this month for our sci-fi movies. Number 20 on the greatest sci-fi movies of all time, according to Rotten Tomatoes. And Star Trek episode Revisit to be determined.
It's too bad it couldn't have been Tenet, because I watched that last night. And I know we're going to do it eventually. So
we can do it as a stream or something. One of these upcoming. Sure. I'll watch it at some point. We can just do a lighthearted review. Thank you, patrons, very much. Let's get to our patron thoughts. You can leave your thoughts on upcoming episodes if you're a patron at the $5 level. We'll read them. And, oops, sorry. Let me go back here. We'll read them. And what is this? There we go. Matt Ross says, Similitude, another non-Zindi arc that could have been a season 2 story. I guess the cloning thing is whatever. Other shows have done it better. Oh, and there are magnetic rocks. Well, at least we get sexy time massages. 2 clones out of 5.
Wow.
Jakey's Gamer says, Similitude, once you look past the questionable mechanics of someone growing from a newborn to adult in a matter of days, something you think would be likely to be more horrific than you see happening in this episode, I think the concept is great and the story is emotionally effective. Billingsley gives one of his best performances as Phlox, and the guest actors are convincing younger versions of Trip. You see the end coming from a mile away, but it doesn't make the journey any less effective. 4, and She Was My Sister 2s out of 5.
Yeah, I think it's one where the ending isn't really
not the important part of it. Yeah. As soon as he's cloned, you know what the ending, what the cold open meant. Yeah.
Although, I mean, if they had balls, they would have been like, well, Trip's dead. We may as well just stick with this guy. And then go, that's interesting.
It's the version of the Riker story where they were thinking about getting rid of Will and just having Tom be on the ship. It's like, this is Sim.
I think it would be interesting. It would be an interesting change because you're not changing anything, but you're technically changing everything.
Someone on the internet made a good point. They shouldn't have called him Sim. They should have called him Quad after Trip and Quad.
I was thinking that too. Yeah, that's what I thought he was going to say was Quad. Yeah.
And also, Star Trek insults everyone named Dennis, where Phlox says, maybe we'll call him Dennis, and everyone's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Nick the Rat says, Similitude, who else thought it was going to be Mayweather in the casket? I wonder if Sim has Trip's memories from when he's older. The convo between Sim and Archer was actually pretty chilling. You think Archer would have thrown him in the brig after? I think T'Pol should have given him one last fling. Did either of you cry during this? I give it 4 out of 5 tears. Didn't cry. I found it... I didn't bring it... I found this episode to be slightly melodramatic in a way that negated the emotion of it. There's a lot of swelling music in this one. I barely ever noticed music, and it noticed it enough to be annoying to me.
Yeah, they're belaboring the point a bit.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
I actually, maybe the lines weren't great, but I actually did like that scene where he thanked Phlox for being a good dad.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a scene that works if it has more time to breathe. If you get more time where they spend time together.
I just think Phlox was so tertiary to that, really.
Right,
like, he did spend a lot of time with him, and I can understand it, but it wasn't really the focus of anything. It felt a little bit of a distraction at the last minute to me, really. I don't have a problem with it, but yeah, I just didn't like Phlox going, you are a hell of a son. I'm about to cut your brain open.
When he said, you were a great dad, I wish he'd been like, well, I wish you had been a lawyer.
Did you fix the engines? before this is over. Royo says, Archer and Phlox decide to play God again and commit another severe breach of medical ethics by cultivating a sentient clone so it can be harvested for its organs. Unlike in Dear Doctor, where Archer and Phlox intentionally withhold a medical cure with the intent to cause extinction so that a master race with the right genetics can inherit the planet, in Similitude, the writers finally realize Archer is not infallible and has committed a no-no. Archer is at long last confronted with the consequences of playing God, and the episode actually plays out like classic Star Trek morality tale, only unlike Dear Doctor, Archer conveniently refuses to let nature take its course this time. My only real criticism is that setting out to murder people for their organs puts Archer on a level of the Vidians, the gruesome proto-Borg villains of early Voyager. There should have been more long-lasting consequences for him stepping so far over the line. Also, given the stupid shit Trip pulls at the start of the episode, you have to wonder who he had to give topless massages to in order to be promoted to captain of the Enterprise in Twilight. 4 out of 5.
You know, I know they probably, well, maybe they will do this, but I have a feeling they won't. I feel like we're getting close to being primed for a Q-type character to take Archer aside and be like, do you realize the shit that you've done?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and just like go down the list of the crazy, like unethical, questionable shit that he's done.
Yep.
And have him like not stand trial for it, but just defend his actions kind of thing. But I assume
has it been effective for you? Archer's, we kind of talked about, but like has Archer's motivation for doing the stuff that he's doing, including in this episode, been well done or well conceived?
No, I on paper, sure.
Yeah.
But I don't think that they've effectively shown him changing in any real natural way into this guy who needs to do what he's got to do to get it done.
Yep.
So that's why, like you're saying, it kind of swings back and forth episode to episode how they play it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it ties into our where the thing of 9/11 was so visceral, and to live through it, you understand innately what the decision process is there that leads to questionable moral actions on the level of the state. And here, Florida and Trip's sister that we never met is pulling a lot of weight to try to convince you that this is what happened. And because of that lack, the Expanse has to be so difficult for them. The Expanse has to be like this horrible place where their original values are just not working for it, and over the course of time, Archer becomes desperate to it. I don't like the pacing, basically. If this is Archer's just pissed off and he's going to take it out on whoever gets in his way, because of the lack of actual emotional connection you have with Florida and Trip's sister, and in the way they have with 9/11, you need to justify why his desperation is building this way. And I don't think the show's done that effectively.
Yeah, I mean, the lack of emotional connection, literally anybody has.
Yeah, except for Sim, who clearly loves his sister.
Yeah, no, I mean like in the world.
Oh, sure.
Not a lot of love for Florida. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful place.
It's got warm water.
Yeah, and there's little gecko lizards everywhere. It's charming.
Yeah. Yep.
I think it's too bad that this isn't a show that had those officer meetings, because I think one thing they could have done that might have been striking and done a lot of work for them is if they had part of season 3 is that Archer no longer does them.
Yeah.
And so he becomes the buck stops with him. What he says goes, and how that affects the crew and all that kind of stuff.
Do you think it's intentional that they don't do them? Do you think that it's supposed to show a proto Starfleet where it's just unilateral, Archer decides what people do?
Maybe.
More of a military type setup, like instead of a... I don't know if I have no idea if I assume military actually has those kinds of upper staff meetings where they discuss things, but here I don't know if they're trying to get away from that. I think this show just needs it. It's like the captain's log. It just those scenes do so much work for establishing what the points of view are about a topic that to not have them leaves you really suffering.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I don't know if it's on purpose or not. I think that's part of the problem with the show in general is the status of Starfleet is kind of wishy-washy.
Yeah.
Where it's like they want it to be a Starfleet thing, but also it's like, well, but it's not really Starfleet quite yet, and those things don't always reconcile.
Yeah. Cerulio says, Sim is the greatest Starfleet officer who's ever lived because when the ship was adrift,
true.
he remembered that shuttle pods exist. I think this episode would have been better if Phlox had discovered how to stop Sim from aging, but it would only be a 50-50 chance. Archer, not being Janeway, and Phlox, being a doctor, would balk at killing Sim since they could no longer use Sim's short lifespan to justify the procedure. Instead, Sim would have to convince him that he should be sacrificed since there would have been a better chance of saving Trip's life. Since Sim is the perfect copy of Trip, it would show the lengths that Trip would be willing to go to save humanity without us having to lose Trip in the process. 3 out of 5. It's interesting.
They should have killed Trip.
Just
Yeah, they should have had that scene where like, we can't do the thing, whatever reason we can't do it. We're starting to lose him, and he comes out of his coma, and he like does the Saving Private Ryan thing where he grabs Sim's hand. He's like, "Earn this." He dies, and Sim becomes Trip.
The soul just goes into him and just passes to him. A latte librarian, Similitude, serious design flaw that shuttle pods don't have bathrooms. Archer is a tiny sliver of ethical. Archer is a tiny sliver of ethical gray area away from being a murderer when he says, "Don't make me one." Sim was looking for a way out and only agreed to the surgery because he had bad choices. That doesn't let Archer off the hook. If they were trying to make a point about medical ethics and cloning, it wasn't clear. 4 out of 5.
I don't even know if that was the point, though. I don't think it was like a be careful with. I don't know if it was a medical ethics thing. I think it was more of a conceptual, what is existence kind of thing.
Right. Well, I think it kind of goes hand in hand. It's the
Sure.
cloning issue which leads you to this quagmire of having this person now, and what are you supposed to do with them? I think it's more. It's maybe, yeah. I wouldn't maybe define it as medical ethics as much as the philosophical idea of what makes a person an individual, really. Like, it's like, you cloned this guy and he has all the same memories. So is he a different person, or is he are you righteous in taking his body parts and fixing the original version of that person?
Do you think they've ever done it? Because like I like for the past, nobody talks about it anymore. But I remember as a kid, it was like a big deal because they cloned that sheep and everything.
Yeah,
and
Dolly.
It was like, the ethics of cloning, we can't get into this. And then it just kind of all went away.
Mm-hmm.
There's people, there's one.
The Chinese are cloning human fetuses.
They must have like clones walking around. Because like, how do you have that and not do it? You know what I mean? Like most of medical advancements over the years have come from unethical people doing
Haven't we
things.
Haven't we cloned human embryos at this point?
I'm talking like
a full person
walking around. Like we've got one going here.
What was that? That Chinese doctor did something. Chinese clone, like clone baby. Is this what it is? No, he genetically edited babies. That's what happened.
Oh, Gattaca.
Okay. So they were the world's first genetically altered babies. That's what I'm thinking of. So maybe I'm confused with myself, but maybe there's a clone somewhere out there.
There's gotta be somewhere. Did you tell me a Russian scientist or something doesn't have 3 or 4 kids of his that all look exactly like him?
I don't keep talking about it, but that you watch Sisters with Amanda for Rotten Horror, but the true story of that is worse than anything that happened in that movie. It's just like Soviets stole a conjoined twin from their mother, said that they'd died, and then took it and basically tortured it for 50 years or whatever. It's like, what the fuck?
That's what I'm talking about.
Eric McGowan. A kind of bold story idea to drop in the season. I'm not sure it works all the ways that it's supposed to. I wonder, do you think replacing Trip like this temporarily would have been as or more effective if it was stretched over a couple episodes as a recurring plot, or would that just not work on this show?
Yes.
I would have stretched it out, at least to give time to these 2 plots, at least a 2-episode length of time to have this done. I think, and
also it beefs up the possibility that maybe Trip doesn't make it.
Yeah. Ewan Tibbetts says, Similitude, a neat little episode about how memories help mold our identities. Kind of a tearjerker as well. 4 out of 5. Point Extra G says, I remember a story I read in elementary school. It was about a kid who raised a calf to enter into the big show. This is such a Texas story. He's from Texas. A kid who raised a calf to enter into the big show. We have the E. What was it called? The big E out here. He spent time raising it, gave it a name when he got really attached to his calf. And it's a really fine animal. He easily wins the show when he enters it, but he learns the price of getting attached to an animal like that when it's sold at the auction block to be butchered. Archer and Phlox go down the same road here, but the ethical questions that they create are even more substantial than the emotions that they feel. It's true. Kyle Barrett says...
That's why I never eat anything that has a face on it.
Yeah. Just turn the face around. Eat it from the other side. Cal Barrett says, Similitude, future showrunner...
Now you're speaking my language, Wes.
Don't just stare at it, Clay. Eat it. Future showrunner Manny Coto's first foray into Star Trek delivers an emotional punch not too dissimilar to last season's Cogenitor. What makes it so strong is that the ethics are always debated from a point of character rather than simply what the plot demands, with each perspective feeling natural. I like that the background of the Xindi continues to put pressure on Archer to make tough decisions, and the episode is an acting showcase for those involved. Even Bakula does some of his best work. The episode is trying to do an awful lot in 42 minutes and would have benefited from an extended runtime. I wonder if Trip is a Vincent or a Jules when it comes to foot massages, and whether it's in the same league as sticking your tongue in the holiest of holies. A third consecutive 5 out of 5. Eat a bitch out, giving a bitch a foot massage ain't the same goddamn thing. Ain't the same goddamn ballpark. I don't disagree with any Cogenitor. That's what I was talking about. You like this better than Cogenitor, I guess.
Yeah, I like that one. Did I?
You
not?
like Cogenitor? Yeah. It's the
Yeah.
gender one where the person kills himself at the end.
Yeah, I think this one's. I mean, I think this one's less messy.
Yeah. I find this one much more interesting of a concept.
Yeah.
Really. Nothing against Cogenitor. I think it's a good episode, but I thought that this one was like. Cogenitor felt like I'd seen it before, even if I hadn't. This one felt kind of fresh in some way. That I had a hard time.
I think they both suffer from Archer not really reconcile. Well, I mean, Cogenitor does a bit because they get that scene at the end where he kind of takes his own feelings out on Trip.
On Trip, yeah.
I think I probably do like this one better than Cogenitor. You know what? You know, it's funny because I was thinking like, man, I'm surprised that they didn't have some character that we never met be the clone here. So instead of a clone, it's like, well, my species, if you inject your DNA into my jugular, can grow what you need, except that when you take it all down, you know, that kind of something where it's like it's not someone on the crew. It's like, oh, we've grown really attached to this talking pillow. It's a shame we have to. I like, and that's kind of what Cogenitor is, where it's like it's an external entity, so there's only so much attachment you can get. Yeah. This one, since they keep it in-house, it's more interesting because of what it means for the interactions and the decisions that are being made and stuff, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. 2 comments left. Tom Hickey says, early in the episode, Phlox reveals a magical larva that they can use to make a sacrificial freak of nature, and Archer asks the important questions like, it becomes a clone? You want to do this with Trip? With the ending already revealed, it was easy to see how this plays out. I don't feel sympathy for anyone involved except for Sim. What a horrifying existence the crew created for him. I wonder, if Sim catches up to Trip's age, would Sim remember the accident and Trip's final thoughts? That could have been providing interesting context to Sim's sacrifice, reliving the moment a life was cut too short. 2 out of 5.
I was thinking, you say 2?
He gave it a 2.
Oof. I was thinking that too. Like if he, let's say they both continue to coexist, do they now, like Tom Riker, have separate memories, or do they continue to share memories?
Is it a singularity? They just like become a singularity of memory or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. It would have been a nice moment to have something like. It also would have done a good job of tying it into it. It clearly defines that Trip is doing the Trip is Sim. You know, if there's a moment where they combine and they have the same, despite their separate paths to get there, they have the same thought at the same moment. You go, oh, I guess it is Trip, and that's it. Oh, we almost missed one. There's a typo in this title, but it's right above it, so I'll read it. There's 2 left here. Mary Pat F says, another episode starting at the end and catching the viewers up. More Vulcan pressure techniques that I don't know why I need to get more involved as the previous ones work. I guess for the various positions they can be put into. Is there not a second engineer to back up Trip in case an issue of this case of an issue on this very important mission? Was this all to show T'Pol's feelings for Trip, despite trying to show that with Archer in Twilight? 3 out of 5. I'm glad I'm not the only person confused about whether or not who T'Pol wants to be with. You don't care?
That episode sucks. I don't.
Twilight was voted. I didn't say another thing. Twilight was voted in some poll that it was the best episode of Enterprise by the fan community.
Those people are fucking high.
This is a strange choice.
It's a layup episode where it's like, if you don't think about it, it's like, oh my God, look at all the stuff that we see in the future, and it's so sad because you can't remember shit. It's like, well, if you think about it for 2 minutes, it's a stupid episode. I think
in this case it steps on the Trip and T'Pol thing. They were too close.
I think none of that matters because in Twilight you get back to you reverse time and nobody remembers anything that happened.
Correct.
So it doesn't impact anybody.
Yeah.
And if I was casual acquaintances with somebody and then I ended up living with them for 12 years and taking care of them while crazy or whatever, I would probably develop some feelings too. So I don't think it's a mutually exclusive thing there.
I don't either, but I think in a better constructed show, that would be a point of awareness on the show's part there, because what it comes across as is the writers just will pair T'Pol up with anybody who's in the way of her, that's par for the course with the show, unfortunately. This season is the only time that they've paired her off specifically with Trip, and even there this is the first time they've really started to pull the trigger on that. But you get the stuff where Archer's falling into her boobs and stuff, and because I early on I said, are they angling these two together, because it seems like they are trying to go that way, but they never really committed to it. Yep.
So
wishy-washy stuff.
Indecisive.
Groppler,
but hey, man, that's life, baby.
Groppler John Zorn with final comment says, yeah, ethics, whatever. Just listen to my pitch here. Most of the episode is exactly the same, except it's clear that Sim is not in any way willing to sacrifice himself. Last scene, after T'Pol shows up in Sim quarters, we cut to sickbay where Archer and Phlox are waiting. The door opens, and Sim stumbles in just a little bit bow-legged, lays down on the bio bed without a word, and smiles as Phlox delivers his injection. 4 going-away presents out of 5.
I was
Seems
a little
logical.
bit curious. Did they just make out?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Unclear.
How often were she and Archer having sex in Twilight? It's 12 years. You can tell this.
I don't know. I mean, he had a brain thing. Not like he was about to go sacrifice himself for the good of the ship. I mean,
Archer in Twilight's just keeping up the memory loss thing, even though he doesn't suffer from it anymore. He's like, I don't remember having sex. When did that happen? That didn't happen yesterday. I don't remember any of that. That's it. Thank you, patrons, for your comments about Similitude. Clay, what are you going to give this one on a scale of 1 to 5?
I'm going to give it a 5.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I don't know. This one hits all the buttons for me. Like I said, I think this is, for this show, from what I've seen 2.5 seasons in, this is one of the best ideas, executions, et cetera, et cetera. It's missing the intense ethical, did we make the right decision aspect of some of the other ones like Dear Doctor and Cogenitor and stuff, but they don't that's not a prerequisite for being a 5, is you have to possibly cause the death of well, I mean, I guess they do that in this one too, but it's not quite as dark as they usually are with it.
Yeah. I'm going to give it a 4. I just don't think Enterprise has ever had a 5 yet, in my opinion. But it's a good 4. I would say that I would agree with everything you said after it. I think that this is the best episode of Enterprise that I've seen, at least conceptually, to this point. There's probably a better executed one, but this one was caught me a little bit off guard. I wasn't prepared for it. I was surprised. I was like, the show doesn't usually do things like this. This is unusual. So I'm going to give it a 4. And be happy with it. And it's one of the best ones of the season, one of the best ones of the series so far. Thank you, patrons. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Similitude, that's it. We both gave it, or I gave it 4. Clay gives it 5. We're continuing on with Carpenter Street is the next one, I think, which is a great album that the crew puts together after they return from the Xindi mission. We'll listen to the album in full and then talk about all the liner notes.
I was going to say, is this another one where they go back to like 1962 Pennsylvania or something?
They go to 2004 Detroit, if I'm remembering correctly.
Really? Oh,
yes.
So it is a time travel. Let's go
That
back.
is a time travel episode.
Sure.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Thanks very much for listening. We're now calling episodes before they happen.
I can't wait to see what crazy clothes they end up wearing.
Thanks, guys. Clay, do you have anything you want to say before we go?
I don't know what exactly week we're in, but Rotten Horror, we just did Brian De Palma's Sisters. And
so we're up to the next one. Yeah, the next one will be out, whatever that is.
Okay, so that's Ken Russell's The Devils, which
right.
is a great watch. I recommend it. It's not for the faint of heart, but it's a great movie. And this month we'll be doing Friday the 13th. Despite what the last episode claimed, Part 4 was not the final chapter. We will be doing Friday the 13th, Part 5, A New Beginning, this month on Patreon.
That's excellent. And then, as I said, it's a Star Trek revisit on Patreon. We'll have to decide the episode. We don't know it yet. And then it is Clockwork Orange. A Clockwork Orange is the other movie that we'll be covering. Cool. Thanks very much, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. It's another long episode. These Enterprise episodes, we got to do better at trimming this down, or something's going on here. Yeah, the episodes themselves have no problem. That's it. Thanks very much for listening. We'll see you later.